those who gave the orders. No one asks about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain. And no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. 10 trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money in the dark. 8 towers of iron surround the desert town. On a cold December morning, 7 martyrs knocked them down. 6 fathers still waiting for their 6 sons to come home. 5 mothers who know better and accept that they're gone. 4 years I've been hunted, still I breathe free. 3 times I shot the sheriff and did not spare the deputy. 2 prayers I'm praying until we're together. 1 promise I'm keeping tonight and forever. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Good evening. Welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now. We're with you to the end. And the end didn't happen on the weekend, so lucky for us. But maybe there's a lot of little things around that, lucky for us, that mainstream media just put a dash of sprinkle on top. That's why this show is very important. That's why that channel is very important. And that's why you're here, because you probably like to participate in the high-end levels of the conspiracies. And one of the big conspiracies, of course, kind of wraps around Chicago and these big conferences, because police arrested, 3 dumb idiots in the typical false flag operation. Like, it is so typical, it's amazing that we don't come up with newspaper ads for, job wanted or job requests. FBI, false flag operative, must be stupid, must be able to walk to a public place carrying improvised something or others, and all that sort of thing. It's just that blatantly obvious. Mainstream media is catching on hand and foot, just going like, aren't there any terror plots? Is everything something manufactured in a script? Like in the old days, there used to be, appeal cases about entrapment that, that just wasn't according to Hoyle. Like, you weren't supposed to do those kinds of things. So if I find you, intimidate you, threaten you, cajole you, bribe you into breaking the law, how can I possibly claim that I've made some sort of a legitimate arrest? I don't think you can. The other hook on this tree is the fact that an FBI agent's gone missing and still hasn't been found as far as I know. And this is just a totally bizarre story. FBI agent Stephen Ivins disappeared earlier in May 11th. Said his agency was just, a total bunch of whacknuts who he thought were extremely dangerous. And he's supposed to have wandered off into the Verdugo Mountain Wilderness area east of Burbank, California. He's a 3-year FBI agent who specializes in these, high-end intelligence matters. He's a former LAPD officer with many years under his belt. And he just kind of loses it. And, one of his neighbors said they saw him in Burbank near his home. And, of course, the media publishes the address to his home, which just seems to be, like, I thought it was against the law, to identify an FBI agent or something like that. But they do it. So it seemed to be rather, impudent to lay out exactly where his house is, especially if he's really working in sensitive areas. Like, the whole reason for a lot of the secret show trials is supposed to be so we can keep all these abuses of power and the people behind them secret. And here we go, we flash this guy's name and picture and his address in the media. Rather strange. But one of his neighbors said when they saw him, he seemed dazed and confused the day before staggering down the street, which seems to be totally out of character for this individual, unless he's been drugged. Of course, we go to Sorcia Fall and we get, a lot of sprinkle put on top that may or not be true, or could be 100% improvisation here. But because of the nature and severity of the case and the fact there is no other information being put forward by any type of civil authority, I guess we have to grasp for straws. But he says he was connected to a former FBI agent named Donald Schachtelben, and he was a guy who was a bomb expert around the September 11th 2001 incident. He retired in 2008. Seemingly he has been implicated in some type of child pornography deal. He may have been set up or framed that way. Of course, Sorcia Fall always has his fingers in the pie with the Russian foreign intelligence agencies and that sort of thing, and the Kremlin, so obviously he's a shill working on their side. But he said this guy approached the Soviet envoy, or I should say Russian envoy, it's all the same thing, I guess. They still want to go back to the old Soviet Union days. Vladimir Vinokurov, the Consulate General of San Francisco, while he was visiting Los Angeles, came to his hotel room. This chap is always under surveillance by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and some of their shadows, saw this and went after this guy, and he fled into the wilderness. He was very concerned that they were doing something terribly, terribly evil, and of course with this conference coming up in Chicago, that very well may have included a super false flag operation. So what I've noticed in the technique is they do something really evil, and then they just get a few paid stooges to stand out front and catch the shock and awe and be the patsies on the hook. So they convince you to do something dumb, and you're dumb enough to do it. You stand in the street holding all kinds of stuff, and then they do, something really horrible, like blow something up or such. But you happen to be there. The lights are on, the cameras are on. It looks like you did it, and they have a much better false flag operation. That's pretty much what happened in Toronto with the Toronto terrorists. Is they found some dumb patsies to go through the motions of pretending to be terrorists, while more than likely in the crux of the matter, the intelligence services, the police, and the army were hauling real high-grade explosives into the downtown core and would probably blow something up and then blame it on these fools, and they'd be put in prison for the rest of their lives to protect them from the angry mobs of people that might want to lynch them, and the truth would never come out. National security would be invoked, and we'd never see the light of day of facts or people ever again. So this is the kind of the scenario that works with these people, and I don't expect it to change. It's such an old game plan, though. It's getting very, very stale. It's like, you know, you play in sports or something like that. If the team always has the same play and the opposition now knows what that play is and does a proper defense and prevents you from scoring goals or doing anything, well, you know, the game gets boring after a while, really. One of the really strange things is we have like one of those duck in a noose statements going out too, so we have to wonder a little bit. The family of this FBI agent, Ivans, is supposed to have been commenting about what their infant child has been saying. Daddy's work, daddy home. Daddy's work, daddy home. Is this some sort of a notice or clue to the whereabouts of this guy, or a signal? It's difficult to say, but he doesn't seem to have responded to it. So they've already given these turkeys, Brent Betterly, Brian Church, and Jared Chase, the name NATO 3. So every time we have one of these events too, they always come up with some kind of little acronym for them to you know, to make it a little better understood for Joe Sixpack, I guess, who looks at the news for 5 minutes every year and calls it a day, thinking he's well informed. So these activists travel to Chicago. And then one little snippet I found in the Chicago Press today is they implicated this guy Betterly with the Black Bloc. And the Black Bloc is notorious here in Toronto after the G20 debacle as being agents provocateurs of the greatest capacity, period. And it appears wherever they go, they are agents provocateurs. So I think we can pretty much say with very little doubt that these guys may be agents provocateurs. Not that maybe they're law enforcement or spooks. They may have just been recruited to alleviate some of their difficulties. Some of the difficulties that these chaps have is Jared Chase's father, Steve Chase, died about 5 weeks ago after a long struggle with a disease that left him disabled. And we know that in America they don't have free health care. So, you know, there could be a tidy, tidy sum attached to 5 weeks in the hospital after a long struggle with the disease. Even with benefits, a lot of these benefits only pay 80%. So, you know, if you're hit with $1 million bill or something, yeah, 80% is wonderful, but you still owe $200,000 or something. So there could be a big money angle for him to say, okay, I'll do it. Brett Betterly from Florida has a brother. This brother is on charge for murder in Florida and some drug deal that went sour. His name is Drew, and there could be a great deal of pressure or influence brought to bear on a bargain basement price there, where we say, okay, you know, we won't fry him in the electric chair if you do this, or we'll take it easy on him and reduce the charges, or something along that line if you cooperate to be our patsy. Whether the third chap has anything to do with that is difficult to say. And then one of the other little stories that comes out of it is they were stopped by the police that arrested them the week before, which is no big surprise because they were being followed for a long period of time before this happened, which is another classic false flag type of scenario. Is they're following you all the time for months and months and months and giving you the stuff. They buy you the gasoline, they give you the bottles for your Molotov cocktails, and it appears they even made a road stop in Chicago that was very well filmed and posted on YouTube. It doesn't have a great number of views considering the national significance of the case. When I found it, it was just slightly over 2,000 views, so I guess a lot of people in media either didn't report it, don't want you to know it, and don't want you to see it, so I made a point of trying to find it, and we have it here. So if we can roll the first video on our NATO 3, we can show you the theatrics involved. I don't think there'll be any Academy Awards and no special effects, you know, kudos going out, but it does let you know how the game is played.
We're being raided right now. For those that are watching, we are being raided by the CPD as we speak.
What is this for, officers? What is this for?
I'm unbuckling my seatbelt.
We're gonna unlock it.
I got stuff in my...
I'm putting my phone in the pocket, okay?
Can you take her on back for me?
Put your coffee down so you don't burn your crotch.
Put it down in there.
Mine out. Now go ahead and slide all that stuff down on the floor and step out.
Anything on you? Nothing on you, right?
No, sir.
No, sir. Anything on you? Nope. It's going to cover your local camera. Put it in there. Back over here.
And what's the location that you have the vehicle stopped? 5703.
One by these police officers here. We were just pulled over, stopped, license. They didn't give us an explanation to why they're stopping us. You're watching us live right now.
12 cars. 12 cars. We were pulled over by unmarked, ununiformed cars.
The whole time. I had the stream going the whole time.
Nice.
Did you have the stream going the whole time?
Yes, I did.
Awesome.
All right,
So,
me and Tim Cass, I had it on Drew.
I was driving and we saw cops coming up behind us. A gray, unmarked police car, Crown Victoria. We don't know if it was a police car.
They shut my feet off. They just shut my feet off.
All right.
Now I just turned it back on. We are live back again. We are just stopped by police.
Tweeting it.
We just got stopped by 12 police
Luke and
officers.
Dustin were cuffed together.
We were handcuffed together. 12 police officers.
That was all live stream. We got it.
Okay, there we had it sort of live with an interruption in the middle, I guess, as the police turned off their cameras. But we just have to wonder, like, if these are terrorists under surveillance and such like that. Like, it just seems totally inappropriate that they just be letting them go. And obviously there should be some paraphernalia, perhaps, implicating them in some type of terrorism. In the written portion of articles related to this, they mention that the police, made some comments. One officer asks another what Chicago police would have said in 1968 when they clashed with demonstrators, not that any of them would have been born in 1968, at the Democratic National Convention. Billy clubbed the skull, the officer replies. Another officer says to men in the car, who the police take as protesters, "We'll come look for you." And of course a week goes by and they came looking for them and got them on some kind of trumped up terrorism charges. Now you can see by the look of these guys, they look like, real desperados and all that sort of thing. So it just seems very, very strange that we have, an event like this where these kids are stopped and hassled as such. But it just seems to be the whole way America is starting to go nowadays. America just is totally complicit. According to this article we have here, Perverted Justice, The Rise of Secret Trials in America, that they're just letting go with all sorts of, dark human rights abuses, including torture, false arrests, and such like that. The justice system has become completely distorted and undermined. In a couple of decisions made that they talk about in this article, the Ninth Circuit Court allowed a suit against torture memo author John Yoo to go forward on behalf of Jose Padilla, the mother of the tortured so-called terrorist. He was tortured while he was in custody on the advice of this man. The Ninth Circuit granted Yoo immunity. The law surrounding torture was so muddled when he dispensed his advice that he should have been given the benefit of the doubt. And well, wait a minute. See, the benefit of the doubt isn't supposed to go to the state. This is all ass backwards here. The benefit of the doubt is supposed to go to the defendant, the accused. You get the benefit of the doubt, not the state. It's completely reversed. So the judge bases his decision on a European Court of Human Rights decision from 1978 that found a series of grim techniques used by the British against Irish internees was not torture. It was cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, but that wasn't torture. So they just make up some kind of fine line, put it between to say everything's okay. So the co-author who drafted this torture memoranda, Jay Bybee, is now a judge on the Ninth Circuit. So here you have a judge in the same court who participated in this stuff being decided upon by one of his confreres in the same court. That seems to be a very clear conflict of interest, which is another baby that's been thrown out with the bathwater. In a D.C. Circuit Court decision, we have something called the Latif case. Two movement conservative judges overruled a district court that had concluded that Latif, a 36-year-old Yemeni who spent the past 10 years of his life in prison at Guantanamo without being charged, with only vague suspicions connecting him to terrorist groups, should be released because the record did not contain sufficient evidence to warrant a life sentence in the absence of charges. Judge Janice Rogers Brown G.W. Bush appointee, wrote that the usual presumptions had to be reversed in cases involving Guantanamo detainees. The government secret conclusions had to be presumed correct unless they were contradicted by compelling evidence to the contrary. And then, of course, in all the rules they set up, you are denied any access to the witnesses or the evidence. So you have absolutely no ability to rebut or respond to any of the things that happen to you. And what gives this judge the right to reverse all the case law and all the progress of human society up to that day? Her decision has been heavily censored, of course. There's misstatements in it about rules of evidence, inexcusable disregard for critical facts. Facts, we don't need facts, we make them up. Neither was it their role to effectively gut the Supreme Court's decision in another case, Boumediene versus Bush, about habeas corpus for Guantanamo prisoners. So what we're coming up with is an ascendance of justice of secrecy in American courts. Use American courts in the legal processes to validate torture, to validate supposed benefits America has received from these practices, and to shield the actors and their helpers. In another example, they go back to old Russia in 1977 when the KGB was organizing a dissident harassment thing to go after people for some alleged bombing and blaming it on 3 Armenian men who were tried, convicted, and executed for their role. And then, of course, after the Soviet Union breaks down and evidence becomes available, we find out that all this was made up and manufactured, and these guys were just puppets. And we can pretty much assume that the terror was caused by the state and a false flag operation. And this is something that I've said for a long time too. There is no justice. The only natural law that these evil people use is what I would call the might makes right law. And the reason they can get away with it is because the people let it happen and don't do anything about it. Some of them even think it's funny. Yes, it's quite funny. But as the slippery slope gets wider and wider and wider, sooner or later you will fall on it too. It's, you know, it's just quite uncanny that people can be so asinine to think that they're exempt from a lot of things. Like, one thing I never had time to talk about much is, you know, some of the perils of the local hospital, since my friend Pavlina was, you know, put on the carpet up there in her noble stand against, you know, these bureaucratic fiends. So, you know, I'm researching in the backyard and reading my material, and the neighbors are out talking about, you know, a horrendous event that they had happen in the hospital. They thought it was all a bowl of cherries, some of them, that you know, this poor woman was so mistreated in the hospital, and they think that all their institutions are perfect. And the sad story that you hear a young man talk about, where his father has a heart attack and he's taken to this hospital. He's left in the corridor for 8 hours, and after 4 hours he has another heart attack, and he's still ignored. No one spots it, no one comes to check on him, and when they do finally return after the 8 hours and the second heart attack, his body is in a very, very, very sour state of affairs. They bring him in for emergency surgery, try to save his life, but he passes, and that's the end of him. So you thought, like, it's never going to happen to you, you're never going to need the hospital. At least, you know, when the Sikhs had their issue, they massed in the streets by the thousands and had a giant protest. This place is just a walking nightmare, and it's just a damn shame my friend wasn't in there a second time, as difficult as the circumstances were and could be again, because she probably would have spotted that and brought that to those people's attention, even if she had to take a black eye for it, because the man's going to die, he just had a heart attack. And these people are so stupid that they can't even triage a critical, life-threatening event. But it's just like everybody's paid to be stupid lately, for some strange reason. So there's good news too. There are patriots in the world, there are patriots in the United States of America, and some of them even hold public office. Naomi Wolf, writing for the British, has to talk about a case in America that should be front page news across the whole United States of America and all its territories. But it's not. Swept under the rug with a big broom, because it involves that National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, with the infamous Section 1021, that's supposed to bestow on any American president the power to detain U.S. citizens indefinitely without charge or trial, which would just seem to be the total opposite of what the United States is supposed to stand for. So I have to give credit to a lot of people. They name some of them in this article. And some of them aren't even Americans. So they go to court. U.S. District Judge Catherine Forrest in New York City's Eastern District ruled on this case. And whether you know it or not, or understand it or not, this one woman saved America from the abyss by reading the law properly, understanding what the Constitution means, and sending it back to the power brokers to say, this is garbage. So we have many miracles working all at once. One, that you found a constitutional judge who had courage and guts, and you had people who were willing to put a case before the courts. So Pulitzer Prize winning author Chris Hedges of the Nation Institute, editor Jennifer Bolin of Revolution Truth, Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg, and co-founder of Occupy London, Kay Wargala, Days of Rage editor Alexa O'Brien, and Icelandic parliamentarian and WikiLeaks activist Birgitta Jónsdóttir brought this case before the courts. We had to get a girl from Iceland to come and represent the people of the United States of America because they're just too butt-fuck stupid to even stand up for their rights. Like, pardon my French, but you're letting your country go down, slide into an abyss with the most horrid piece of legislation, even something that Chairman Mao probably wouldn't have the nerve to pass, or even Comrade Hitler or Comrade Stalin. So the language in Section 1021 is so vague that it could sweep up anyone. The law fails to define or specify what associated forces or the concept of substantial support actually mean. There were also a couple of Americans standing by. One was Princeton professor Dr. Cornel West, was standing by to become a plaintiff if necessary in the next round. Birgitta Jónsdóttir came, or wanted to come, with a letter from her government saying that the United States would not give Iceland written assurance that they would not detain her under the National Defense Authorization Act for appearing before the courts to get due process of law. U.S. federal agents have confiscated her Twitter account and her personal bank records. Now, you tell me. She's a parliamentarian from a country we have diplomatic relations with. What the hell's she got to do with anything? So the judge wanted assurance from the state's lawyers that this section and this law could not be used to sweep up hypothetical, peaceful, best-selling nonfiction writer who had written a hypothetical book criticizing U.S. foreign policy. The lawyers representing the government, two of them, said they couldn't give those assurances. So if you wrote a book critical of the government in a hypothetical situation, you'd be aiding the terrorists. So these sections were knowingly written to give the president these kinds of abusive powers. It's amazing they didn't even take the judge away or something. So an individual could run the risk of substantially supporting or indirectly supporting an associated force without even being aware that he or she was doing so in the face of what could be indeterminate military detention. The judge says due process requires more. Oh, yes, much more, believe me. Upholding the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law is a triumphant moment. Judge Forrest has asked Congress to clarify the language protecting America's right to trial and the First Amendment's protections of speech and assembly. Representatives Adam Smith, Democrat, Washington, and Justin Amash, Republican, Michigan, have presented an amendment to Congress, an amendment that does just that. Those who wish to vote against it, therefore voting clearly, without any ambiguity for stripping Americans of their constitutional right, will be exposed. The House thus votes for or against the power handed to the executive by the NDAA to hold any of us anywhere forever for no reason. There can be no hiding from this. Lawyers defending the administration's position made that perfectly clear. Many senators, including the authors, Chuck Schumer, sent out letters to their worried constituents flat out denying our fears, what Section 1021 does. Don't you read flippin' English? Law is written in legalese. Legalese means whatever the words are meaningless. What the words can be twisted into is the meaning of the law. So whatever you can twist those words into is the law. That's why you have to be very specific when you write those words down, that they are not open to any misinterpretation. Then the big one, of course, is no major news media organizations attended the original hearing. Why should you know anything? You're a slave. Slaves don't get to know. The trial and the NDAA itself have been so inadequately reported by mainstream outlets that I keep running into senior editors and lawyers who have never heard of it. But of course, we are in the internet high technology generation. How long could it take to find out? 5 seconds? It allows the president to detain Americans without charge or trial, I pointed out. His aides assured him that this was not the case. I said, have you ever read the bill? His reply is, it's 1,600 pages. Yes, and what's your point? Have you ever read the bill? You have to read the bill. That should be something that is the law, a constitutional requirement. That even if it is 1,600 pages, that you have to go through every line and every word and sign off on it that you read it before you're allowed to vote on it. And then we don't have to worry about these blank checks being stuck in. I'm sure he would be very critical about someone taking over all his money or accounts and not read anything and just say, well, here, you take control of everything and don't bother me. So, you know, it's a lot of words to read. I gotta do like that other guy, you know, back in those days, Charlie, and jump in the hot tub with all the babes. Don't have time to read this stuff. Don't you have staff? So a Freedom of Information request filed by Michael Moore and the National Lawyers Guild proves in exhaustive detail that the Department of Homeland Security and its fusion centers coordinated with local police in the violent crackdown against Occupy last fall. The government cannot be trusted with powers to detain indefinitely any U.S. citizen, even though Obama promised that he would not misuse these powers. The United States government is already coordinating a surveillance and policing war against its citizens designed to suppress their peaceful assembly and criticism of its corporate allies. Corporate allies. Corporate allies. Got nothing to do with other countries. It's these corporations. They own all these people. They're their boys. And then the beauty of it is, because this is where the fight is made or broken, the plaintiffs' lawyers all worked pro bono. The plaintiffs themselves paid their own way to make their case. Those people saved your assholes. They did it on their own dime. Because ultimately, you are the one that has had the state declare war on. You, one day, you will face it. And if it wasn't for people like that, standing up and laying it on the line, coming into enemy territory, fearful of arrest and permanent detention, if not assassination, to stand up for your rights, your liberties, the restoration of America, the Republic. A woman from flippin' Iceland had to do it. There isn't one person elected to office anywhere in the United States that could do this. And then, as they say here, it's just sheer luck they ran into a judge who was courageous in supporting the Constitution of the United States of America. And our choice to be president is nut bar A or nut bar B. We got a guy who's got no ID, no background. His history changes with the wind, and another guy who comes from a church that baptizes Adolf Hitler and has funneled lots of money offshore. I think Iceland's a nice little place. Might be some volcanoes up there, but you know, they told the banksters where to go, and you can vote for somebody that'll actually go to the United States and save the Republic in her time of need. So then we go to Britain, we see the same thing. This is a global thing. It's got nothing to do with just, you know, it's your land, my land. They're making a world global government. All the laws are going to be the same all around the world to get this going. So in Britain, you have Ken Clarke praising the newspaper, the Daily Mail, for its campaign against their plans to have secret court hearings. He says the Daily Mail did a service raising concerns of civil liberties groups. Judges, rather than ministers, will now have the final say on whether a case is heard in secret or not. The basic principle that justice has to be seen to be done will be preserved. Not exactly. Defendants or claimants will not be allowed to be present, know or challenge the case against them, and must be represented by a security-cleared advocate rather than their own lawyer. So this is still the classic case of you know, the communist advance. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So they went 2 steps forward to say, screw the judges, we don't need you. Oh, we have a big crisis, and like in tag team wrestling, we tap you, you fold back. Oh, now we'll let the judge decide. But we're still having secret trials. See, the whole object of the game here is not to have secret trials. So they got what they wanted. So what they do is they get the judge to pervert the course of justice, to decide on something. He shouldn't even be having secret trials, period, for anybody. So that's how they use you. So in Britain, too, they have another thing called the Public Order Act. And there's a section in there that pretty much takes away all your right to free speech. So after a string of controversial arrests, it goes now coming before Parliament, well, maybe, you know, we're a little too evil with this. So, of course, they're arresting Christian street preachers, critics of Scientology, gay rights campaigners, even students making jokes. So the Act, Section 5 of this Act says, you know, insulting is illegal. Well, what's insulting? To who and how and why? So basically, you know, it's almost impossible to say anything to anyone about anything without breaking this law. And the police are on top of you right away to take you away. So one university student walks up to a cop on a horse. He goes, "Do you realize your horse is gay?" And then he gets arrested under this. A 16-year-old from Newcastle said "woof" to a Labrador in earshot of the police and was arrested and fined £200. Now we got a lot of dog walking things going on in downtown Toronto, and their motto, and they wear it on their t-shirts and sweatshirts and all that, is "woof." W-O-O-F, woof. Everybody says it almost as a greeting, woof. Insane. Someone else was carrying a placard at a protest saying Scientology is a dangerous cult. You're scooped. A gay group was protesting Islamic fundamentalists with placards insulting Islam. Scooped. Christian street preacher charged after telling a passerby that homosexuality was a sin. Charges were dropped on him and he won a lawsuit of £7,000. But, you know, technically he's right. It says in his book, homosexuality is a sin. It's a sin. It's a statement of fact. So you get scooped for that. It's just absolutely bizarre. So a lot of groups that tend not to be together are joining to fight this, including Christian groups and gay groups. So the proof is in the pudding. Naomi Wolf in The Guardian. A cycle of overhyped terror plots involving government agency entrapment feeds a multi-million-dollar surveillance industry. Well, that just sums it up all nicely. So she goes through the news stories, finds out how they have all these bumbling fanaticists, helpless druggies, the aimless, the virtually homeless, the mentally ill, and other marginal characters with not the slightest grip on reality. They're lured into discourses about violence against America only after assiduous courting. Some cases involve outright payment by undercover FBI or police informants. And then they take these guys, arrest them, say, you know, they got this big terror problem. That creates the crisis to propose a solution where all these companies from their former bosses and such, like Chertoff's scanning machine, get purchased and make them all extremely rich so they can retire in paradise while you're taken advantage of. So she goes through several of these cases, and, you know, they're basically all the same. So, you know, what one guy here was supposed to be an Al-Qaeda jihadist, his name was Miller. They go after this guy, Cyrus Vance Jr., globalist, and then some, you know, is the DA in this case. So the cops are following this guy. 400 hours of surveillance, audio and video, tapes, interviews, all kinds of other material that he's a lone wolf terrorist, and even the FBI wouldn't have anything to do with it because they thought it was all a load of bull. One of the big crimes he committed is he pulled out his wallet to buy something and he flashed a $100 bill. So, it's his $100. It was in his wallet. So what? You know, there was lots of guys in the old days, especially when they're trying to pick up girls, probably flashed a big wad of $100 bills. So what? It's their money. But this is the nature of the paranoia that's going on. And what should concern us is the fact that they're manufacturing these things. So she says in her article, we can no longer report and consume such stories as if there were no commercial vested interests involved in creating and sustaining such terror threats. The true Orwellian agenda is to support a vast, new crony capitalist industry that uses terror theater to turn open democracies into surveillance societies. But of course, you'd probably never see that repeated in any American newspaper. That just shows you just the dire importance of changing the channel. This isn't a game. We're up against the wall. It's like, you know, the last few minutes in the game. We're 80 yards away from the goal line. Everything's going against us, including the wind, and we got to march that ball across the field really damn fast, or it's going to be curtains. And there's just so many people don't want to sit up and get with the team because they're just too busy in whatever pop culture diversion they're affiliated with. Charles Taylor, former Liberian president and probably a terrible guy, but anyway, he's being sentenced by the Criminal International Court, and he just wants to make it plain that in Sierra Leone's civil war, you know, even though he is probably guilty of a lot of his crimes, but he says he's not. But one of the big things he's saying is the fact that they're coercing witnesses, they're paying witnesses, and they're even threatening witnesses to testify against them. And the money they're giving them is phenomenal compared to what you would get in this poor African state. So that's not justice. Yes, you like to see this dirtball get convicted. You like to see him get put away for some of the things he's doing or has done. But by the same token, you don't want to see the system of justice perverted for him. And what is the system of justice now? It's just so, you know, poor. It's just unbelievable. This is a case from England where we have a man who's held in detention in a British police station, and the two people, one's a sergeant, the other one's a civilian courts officer or detention officer as they call them over there, are twisting this guy's arm and torturing him, causing him a great deal of difficulty. They were convicted of common assault and sentenced to £100 in compensation, which is just peanuts for what injuries this man sustained, because, you know, in this attack he feared for his life, thought he was going to die. He's just arrested for breaching bail conditions. He had injuries to his spine, which he received as a result. He has to live with severe pain for the rest of his life and serious spinal injuries. He's lucky to be alive, it says in the article. So he's got, the guy pays 100 pounds in damages, 100 pounds in gold maybe. So the judge, or pardon me, the solicitor for him, for whatever reason, says justice has been done. Well, I don't think so. That sounds like a joke to me. I don't think there was any justice in here done at all. These guys had to pay fines. The sergeant had to pay 1,395 pounds in fines, and the civilian officer 730 pounds in fines. And like I say, I just don't see that that is in any way, shape, or form sufficient to the nature of the injuries that this man received. Like, these guys should be put in jail for many long years, and they definitely shouldn't be working in what they're working at. They're just goons. And we get back to, you know, the prostitution of truth that exists in the United States, where we have the story, Obama's literary agent in a 1991 booklet, you know, extolling the fact that he was born in Kenya and raised in Indonesia and Hawaii. So he was writing a book that he never finished because he's probably too busy screwing girls and using drugs or something like that, or coming up with a new CIA plot or whatever. But Barack Obama, in this business blurb for this book, is said to be what he is. This is the whole piece here. Editor of Business International Corporation, served as project coordinator in the Harlem, New York Public Interest Research Group, executive director of the Developing Communities Project in Chicago South Side, you know, commitment to social and racial issues. His first book that was never written, Black and White. Well, in Black and White, we just see that we have a giant fraud here, completely. So, of course, the people who ran this this media company, Distel and Goderich, you know, pretty much fall by the wayside, but they did represent Tip O'Neill, Joe Montana, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Ralph Nader, New Kids on the Block. So, you know, you wonder, like, what's this student got to do with all these big name stars and other media people? And the guy doesn't even finish the book that he's supposed to be writing for them anyway. But for that short moment in time, the truth was told. Imagine they deny everything now and you say, well, it was just a marketing mistake, because there's no one to accept responsibility for anything. Arizona Secretary of State threatens to keep President Obama off the ballot unless he sees a birth certificate. Well, that's a little pie in the sky. What he wants is an email from Hawaii to say that he has a birth certificate. So he wants to see the email, he doesn't want to see the birth certificate. And that's only because people in his state, he's had 1,200 requests for that, to pony up and ask. And he goes, oh, I'm not a birther. So you wonder how they get that little piece of vernacular, a birther. You know what I do? I work in the barn with the pigs, and, you know, I'm a birther, just pull them little piglets out. So they give it some kind of, like, you know, horrendous name, you know, and you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, what conspiracy theorist? He showed his birth certificate. It's a complete and total fabrication and fraud. The name of the hospital isn't the name of the hospital when he was born. It was changed. The place has a new name. The paper couldn't have been printed on the way it was. It was done on a computer printer. It wasn't done on a typewriter. They didn't have computer printers back then. It was the typewriters. The thing's a complete and total fabrication and a fraud. And there's something wrong with us for questioning this? So Arizona's Republican Governor Jan Brewer told CNN's John King the birthers were leading our country down a path of destruction. No, you idiot. Lies and deception are leading your country down the path of deception, or down the path of destruction. To stop that destruction, kick the bum out. Show that birth certificate. I got to show my birth certificate. Got to show more than that just to get in the United States, not to be president. Got to have a passport now. Birth certificate isn't good enough. Didn't even have to do that a long time ago. You know, to get some of the professional licenses I had to show my birth certificate and other pieces of identification to prove I'm me and that everything's on the up and up. And then it's all examined by the authorities to make sure it's on the up and up. And I can guarantee you, if it wasn't, well, then you wouldn't be getting any of these responsibilities assigned to you. So how does the president get off on this? Because the United States basically is a giant fraud. One little factoid I came across, didn't record it to read it in detail, but you know, it's just background information. I was looking into a death of you know, another great American. Was looking into the Kennedy assassination, and just from whatever luck attached to that article, we knew there was short selling going on at the time of JFK's assassination. So I heard that before, and it was supposed to be rather extensive. 12 of the culprits who knew he was going to die and sold stock the day before and then bought it the day after back again at a much lower price and profited handsomely were 12 United States senators. And I imagine they were very careful on who they recommended to be sitting on the Warren Commission. 12 United States senators. They killed the United States president. They were part of the conspiracy. They had no problem with that. And then people have the gall to say that the government couldn't be behind 9/11, they couldn't be covering things up, profiting from crime. Let me tell you, sweetheart, you live a very, very, very secure life if you think that all these people are some divine Christ-like beings. I can assure you, they are patented evil. Evil so evil that even evil probably has to stand aside. Are Americans catching on, waking up, and unplugging? So I like some of the tongue-in-cheek stuff. The absurdity of the government's claim that the identity of the tough macho Navy SEALs who allegedly murdered Osama bin Laden has to be kept secret in order to protect our fierce warriors from reprisals from Muslim terrorists, while those government officials responsible for the torture and deaths of large numbers of Muslims could walk around identity known, unprotected, and safe. One of those little, you know, little formulas. How come that doesn't make sense? Well, the big reason they can't tell you who was in this raid is because it was all pretend, it was all orchestrated. We were very quick to stick the knife in and say that this so-called compound was a girls' school. It never was designed as a terrorism command post, nerve center, or hideout. It was a girls' school, and in the Islamic world they're very highly protected compared to a lot of other buildings, so they give the aura of something far more sinister when they're not. Never was. The whole thing was a scam from beginning to end. It's the way they rule our lives. It's just like a movie set. We respond to the stimulus of the programming they put in our mind. But the downside is the Congress is going to lose two really upfront congressmen, Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul. Because Ron Paul's running for president, it looks like he's taken a bye at ever returning to the Congress in the next election. And then another guy had a major turn of heart. U.S. Representative Walter Jones was a longtime member of the warmonger crowd. He's the guy who came up with freedom fries way back in its day. And then he's forgotten and flushed down the toilet because he saw the light. So he's very, very upset about the president initiating hostilities based on a recommendation from the United Nations and not Congress. He introduced House Congressional Resolution 107, which clearly states that the president's use of emergency or the U.S. military in an act of aggression without the consent of Congress is an impeachable offense. He caught on. They say in this article that the U.S. Congress has not defended its power since the 1930s with Roosevelt's New Deal. And a lot of it's been done out of fear. Fear of poverty, financial collapse, now fear of terrorism. But they make up all this crap, scarerism, as it's been termed, to try to get us to beg for it, to say that please enslave us because we're so afraid. And then we have real terrorism, and it just doesn't seem to, make the big international story. Some guy, has his dirty underwear or something like that, and that's a big story. Well, we had a real bombing in Italy. This is the father of the child who was killed. Someone put bombs in front of a school, 3 of them, and killed this man's 16-year-old daughter. And this is him at the funeral. So of course, this is the so-called terrorist, but see, they protect his face, so it's, we wouldn't want to recognize the guy and find out, he's a cop or something. This is the poor young child, Melissa Bassi, who was killed in this explosion. The school was across the street from the courthouse. Many other children were wounded, one very, very seriously wounded. That's terrorism, real terrorism. But it just gets swept under the carpet to a degree. And it's funny that, even stuff that happens in Italy, you really got to take credit to the British press because at least they report stuff. And then the people were very upset. They take to the streets. Look like it's pretty crowded protest there. Almost like somebody going to a Ron Paul speak-in or something. There's lots and lots of people, because they thought at first this is a mafia event, because this happened on the anniversary, or very close to the anniversary, of another explosion that was blamed on organized crime 20 years before, because the school is named after the wife of a judge who was deciding cases against the mafia way back when. And who's responsible? One thing I guess we can pretty much be assured of is it wasn't Al-Qaeda. That's for sure, because there is no such thing. It's all made up. You're programmed like a machine. I guess the other big thing is Europe. Kind of hard not to appreciate to some degree that Europe is at the brink, the big brink. So David Cameron's come clean and just told Greece, if you vote in the next election not to accept these austerity packages, you're voting your ticket out of here. Which is probably the best thing that could ever happen to you. If you're in a power and control dysfunctional relationship, as Greece is with the other European Union dictators, you're in a bad state of affairs. Getting out's the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. It's not going to be easy for the first little while, but you'll figure it out. And you get back up on your feet like many other countries did. Let's just take Argentina for one. Iceland for two. Sometimes you got to walk out the door and just say, so one of the little pieces of bull that come out of this, they're going to bolster the Euro firewall. They said this at this G8 conference. Germany's going to do that. They're going to bolster the Euro firewall. There are no firewalls. They took them all apart. It's called free trade. They took apart every firewall that there is, so that when they hit the iceberg, the water could go throughout the whole ship. They say there's a fear Greek citizens could try to withdraw their money from the banks, leading to failures of financial institutions across Europe when the banks cannot afford to pay out because they have no reserves. They haven't let them keep any significant reserves for a long time. Maybe in the olden days they'd have to keep 10% as reserves. They don't do that anymore. A lot of banks, their reserves are zero. And this could happen without notice. And Greeks have already been doing this. So they say Britain has contingency plans. I find that hard to believe. They recommend that the Central Bank of Europe do quantitative easing and inflate the money to some degree. And then for anyone who disagrees with these globalists, then all of a sudden they come up with all the buzzwords. You're a nationalist, an extremist, a xenophobe, or a populist. And they put it all in one sentence even, so they're really mad. Well, that's just something you learn at the London School of Political Warfare. You always associate your adversary with a bad name, so that people attach that to them. But I'd say all these people are relatively sane and rational, just realizing, you pulled my pants down to my ankles and you emptied out all my pockets, and I'm just tired of it. Had enough. Don't want to live like that anymore. Some people don't want to live like that at all, period. There was an incident of an Italian father who threw his 14-month-old daughter and his 4-year-old son off the balcony of his 6th-floor apartment and then leapt to his death himself because he hadn't had a job for 18 months in Italy. One of the big fears about the European breakup is that once Greece goes out the door, a lot of other ones are going to probably say, hey, adios amigo, I'm out of here. This is being forced together because these megalomaniacs want to have a world government and a European Union. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it's the right thing to do or the best thing to do. It defies the laws of economics, but they always throw that out with the bathwater. They're not interested in following any of the rules. And one of the big ones is the economy of scale. You can make things too big, they fall apart. It's just a natural law. So what we'll do is, I guess, we'll show them the answer out of the mouths of babes. An Ontario girl speaking the classic stuff for Comer. Does it very, very well. A 12-year-old knows and understands and can speak the solution to all our problems that all these rich bastards, corporate bankers, can't even begin to understand. Okay, let's roll that video. This is Victoria Grant of Cambridge, Ontario.
It was about 5 or 6 weeks ago that Victoria spoke to a group of 600 people at a Rotary Club, and she's going to be giving the same speech to us today. And I saw it, I think a week or so after it hit the web, it started going around, and so I quickly got on the phone and talked with her dad Zane and invited them here. And so we have a very special treat. So Victoria, come on up, do your thing. Go up.
Have you ever wondered why Canada is in debt? Have you ever wondered why the government forces Canadians to pay so many taxes? Have you ever wondered why the bankers from the largest private banks are becoming wealthier and the rest of us are not? Have you ever wondered why the gross national debt is over $800 billion? Or why we are spending $160 million a day on the interest of the national debt? That's $60 billion a year. Have you ever wondered who receives the $60 billion? What I have discovered is the banks and the government have colluded to financially enslave the people of Canada. I will share with you 3 important points of reference which will hopefully spark enough interest and concern for you to continue the research on your own and to engage your government to stop this criminal act against the people of Canada. First, we will briefly examine the Bank of Canada. Second, we will see how our banking system works today. And lastly, I will offer a viable solution that we can petition our government to implement. A very little known figure in Canadian history is J.O. Gradon McGeer. He was a lawyer, Member of Parliament, and Mayor of Vancouver. His contribution to Canada is probably the greatest in our history. He championed the creation of the National Bank of Canada, whose sole purpose is to create and manage Canada's money. It was formed on July 3, 1934, and owned by all Canadians. Until the 1970s, because of the Bank of Canada, Canada's national debt was held at a constant, manageable level, until the government decided to implement what we now have as our modern-day banking system that is robbing the Canadian people. So how are they robbing us? Allow me to explain how our private banks and government work today. First, the Canadian government borrows money from the private banks. They then lend the debt-based money to Canada with compounded interest. The government then continues to increase taxation of Canadians year after year in order to pay back the interest on the exponentially growing national debt. What results is inflation, less real money for Canadians to spend into our economy, and the real money being used to pad the pockets of the banks. Also, the government gave the banks the ability to loan out money that doesn't exist in the form of loans. When a bank gives you a mortgage, which literally means a death pledge, or a loan, they don't actually give you money. They click a key on a computer and generate the fake money out of thin air. They don't actually have it in their bank vaults. Presently, the banks only have $4 billion on reserve. But they have loaned out over $1.5 trillion. To quote Graham Towers, each and every time a bank makes a loan, a new bank credit is created. New deposits, brand new money. Broadly speaking, all new money comes out of a bank in the form of loans. As loans are debt, then under the present system, all money is debt. What I find interesting is even Jesus, in Matthew 21, drove out the money changers in the temple because they were manipulating the currency to steal money from the people. The private banks are just like the money changers in Matthew 21. They are defrauding and robbing the people of Canada, thus their freedom, and they need to be stopped. How should the banking system work? In an infamous interview, Mr. McGeer asked Mr. Towers, "Can you tell me why a government with power to create money should give that power away to a private monopoly and then borrow that which Parliament can create itself back at interest to the point of national bankruptcy?" Mr. Towers replied, "If Parliament wants to change the form of operating the banking system, then certainly that is within the powers of Parliament. In other words, if the Canadian government needs money, they can borrow it directly from the Bank of Canada. The people would then pay fair taxes to repay the Bank of Canada. This tax money would in turn get injected back into our economic infrastructure and the debt would be wiped out. Canadians would again prosper with real money as the foundation of our economic structure and not debt money. Regarding the debt money owed to the private banks, such as the Royal Bank, we would simply have the Bank of Canada print the money owing, hand it over to the private banks, and then clear the debt with the Bank of Canada. And yes, we have the power and lawful right to do so. In conclusion, it has become painfully obvious, even for me, a 12-year-old Canadian, that we are being defrauded and robbed by the banking system and a complicit government. What will we do to stop this crime? What will we do to ensure that the next generation will live free and clear of the debt-based economy that enslaves them to the banks? Margaret Mead said the following, and I hope that all of you remember this. "Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Thank you.
Okay, out of the mouths of babes. That settles the whole score right across the world. We're in this debt money system where we're borrowing money from private banks instead of countries creating their sovereign wealth from the sovereign assets and sovereign rights that they have. Stupid is as stupid does. So what will you do to survive these debacles based on this corrupt system? From what I understand, most people don't want to learn the system. They don't want to learn what was before. But they are prepared to throw their children off a balcony 6 floors up and then leap to their deaths. But to take a few moments to learn how the system works, or to read that classic book about the Canadian system anyway, the Bank of Canada, Power Unto Itself, like it's written for pretty much like a high school education. It's not super high-end mathematics or economics to a great extent, just plain common sense on how a central bank works and how we can eliminate debt. If you eliminate debt, then you don't have to pay all these high-end taxes. So trying to survive in the system we have now, this Marxist system, because that's where it comes from. These are the parts of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. It's like trying to run the marathon with a hand around your neck, squeezing the air out so that you can't breathe. And then when it becomes harder to run, they squeeze it tighter and tighter and tighter, because you're more and more in debt until you ultimately expire and can no longer run. This is the most common sense thing to learn that could possibly be learned. You don't get into these fiat money systems with central banks controlling the creation of the money supply at profit to them. As a country, the nation state can do it itself. And of course, the most important thing is, even with this system we have, any coined money is not debt money. It's only the paper currency, because the value of coined money is in the coin. There is no interest to pay on that. That is, all the coined money is like United States notes or Canadian bank notes have passed. That's the money of your sovereign nation. And that's one of the big reasons why they want to get rid of a lot of this stuff, because then we can borrow more money from the private banks and put two hands on your throats and squeeze even harder. And you're dumb enough to allow it to happen, because who wants to learn about the basic laws of survival and economics for even 5 seconds? We can just party hardy until we leap off the roof with our children. God, are we stupid. Prime Minister Harper's got a new scam going, the G8 New Alliance for Food and Nutrition Security. So there's, you know, like buzzword right again, alliance, security. And then we see that they're going to spend our money, $219 million over 3 years, with the Canadian International Development Agency, and doing something good for Africa, so they imply. But then I see all the buzzwords. Agricultural transformation. To improve nutritional status and unlock sustainable economic growth in Africa, which means they're going to let big corporations come in and take over Africa. That's what that part means. And the transformation means you're going to lose your rights and your sovereignties to turn it over to these corporations who say they're going to promise to pay you or feed you, but really they're going to probably bring in Monsanto and agribusiness to take over the land. The New Alliance for Food and Nutrition Security will allow African partners, G8 countries, and other donors and private sector, so I said corporations, to create new and innovative partnerships. On your knees, you slave! There's a good partnership. So we can have agricultural transformation to improve nutrition and unlock sustainable economic growth. Thanks for the money. Eat the Monsanto beans, I'm out of here. So when you see all those buzzwords, that's just telling you that you lost a big battle and a big war and it's all over for you. One thing maybe the United States Senate is doing that's sort of on the good side. Everybody heard about this Facebook idiot, Eduardo Saverin, and Facebook, you know, coming up for shares and all this kind of stuff. Did anybody tell you, like, he jumped ship? He gave up and relinquished his U.S. citizenship, and he moved to Singapore because there's no capital gains tax. That's why he's putting Facebook out, so that you can buy shares, because he's going to profit billions and billions of dollars, and he doesn't want to pony up any taxes for it. So I look at him as a bastard, not a hero, because he'll duck out of, you know, an estimated $67 million in taxes. 1,700 people, it says in this article, relinquished their citizenship in the United States last year. So Senator Schumer and Bob Casey are unveiling the expatriation prevention by abolishing tax-related incentives for Offshore Tenancy Act. There's a mouthful. But basically, they're going to hit you with the capital gains tax before you leave. And then the other thing they like in there is they're never letting you come back. You're persona non grata. Cheapskate. So you make all those billions and billions and billions. You've lived in America, prospered in America, and, well, actually, you don't really need to pay taxes anyway. Nobody really needs to pay taxes, because we can just do what this little girl said and just eliminate income tax and the debt system of money, and then everybody gets to keep their money. Nothing wrong with that. You worked for it, you keep it. Canadian Tire across the street can make debt-free, tax-free money in their Canadian Tire coupons. Casinos do it with their casino chips. We can't do it with those little funny money bills we have. Quebec adopted their Bill 78 Emergency Powers Act to go after the rioting students who don't really understand that one of the reasons why, you know, there's cutbacks in education and a lot of other things is the fact that they just can't get any more credit. They use Visa to pay off MasterCard, MasterCard to pay off American Express, and then this to pay that, and this to pay that. It's just a house of evil borrowing, hook, line, and sinker. But of course, nobody explains that to the kids in school, because if this 12-year-old talked to a lot of these students, in a class format where they understood economics, there's no need to riot. We just have to change the system. But anyway, one thing you got to give them credit for, even though there's horrendous violations of the Constitution and civil rights in this bill, which is supposed to time out in July 2013, the kids aren't taken for it, neither are a lot of other people. More people showed up in the street to protest. They didn't run away scared. And there's been some awful battles in there. You know, one of the horror stories I saw in the local Toronto paper was, there was something going on in the street. Some rioters ran into a bar and the cops came in, kicked over the tables and pepper sprayed everybody in the bar who had absolutely nothing to do with what happened outside. So this is the whole reason why civilization adopted professional law enforcement, so you wouldn't have stuff like that. So that you'd only be arresting the people who needed to be arrested under due process of law and strict rules of evidence. Now it's just like something happens, just kill anybody within range, whether they're the ones who need it or not. Well, shit, man, we don't need you for that. We can just go back to the old system and live without you. Might as well just have hordes of vigilantes pouring out into the streets. That's going to do plenty, really. We don't need you guys. So they're after Chief Blair to resign over the G20, hardly. What a lot of people don't realize is he was doing a secret experiment for the government to see how far he could push and how much we would take. So when the time comes to do the mass roundups, we'll already know what to expect. So one of the other people getting, or groups getting their fingers chopped a little bit is the RCMP. Royal Canadian Mounted Police are losing a lot of their benefits up to the tune of $35 million, where their special health cards are being deployed back down to the provinces so the federal government can save money. They're no longer going to have their own special health system. That's just part of the devolution of society as we know it, because we're following Comrade Marx's Communist Manifesto, hook, line, and sinker to the bitter end, and we just can't get out because no one wants to look at the truth. I did do my 10 points, the top 10 things that we're taught to hate. It's hard to cut it down to 10. I had to really work on that. It took me 2 days to do it too. It's a little out of touch with writing because Saturday night up at my place there was a series of explosions outside with hydro transformers blowing up. That was, in the middle of the night. Just fell asleep shortly after midnight. Kaboom! That wasn't fireworks. You get up, you look out the window, kaboom! All the lights go out as far as the eye can see. There's a bright white flash in the sky. You're going like, whoa! Time to get your bug out bag and bug out. So at least being an old Boy Scout, I'm somewhat prepared to deal with this stuff even in my old age. So, as soon as I moved into a place that had an electric garage door opener, the first thing I got for that puppy was a battery backup. Even though I had to put it on credit to get it, because I had to open that door when the power's out to get my car so I can get the hell out of Dodge if I have to. So we pre-positioned the car to get out and then realized, okay, it's not that bad, it's just these hydro transformers. But then, nobody was coming. The fire hall's across the street. No trucks are coming out. You're like, okay, it's darker than sin out here. You could hear the blast probably for a square mile. Where the hell are you guys? So I phoned the fire department and say, did you guys know about the explosions here? And the guys got the nerve to say, well, how did you know it's an explosion? And good timing from God, boom! You hear that? Sounded like an explosion to me, buddy. I get the truck out of the station and try to see what the hell's going on. So these transformers were on fire and burning and all this kind of stuff. They finally figured it out. Miracle of miracles. I can't even understand how hydro got the hydro back up in 2 hours. Like that had to be, I don't even know if the Queen could get service like that. It was amazing. So we didn't get much sleep on the weekend, that's for sure. So we did our list. I love this picture. As soon as I saw this picture, I just go, that was the key to write this whole big long blog here. It's all in your mind because we put it there. And you see our glorified communist looking at his glorified communist youth who's studying the propaganda book, learning all the bullshit. And it's all in your mind, kid, because your thoughts aren't your own. We made them. Actually, I did a show a few years ago. It's still posted here at that channel somewhere. It's from Australian research called, Are Your Thoughts Your Own? Kind of goes hand in glove with this. I would crank back and go through that because it's something you have to ask yourself when you hear all this stuff. Are your thoughts your own? Or were they planted in your mind for you? Are you really thinking for yourself? So when you hear all the buzzwords, you know right away they're coming for you. So like in here we say ceding rights for whatever. Terrorism is the big thing. It's a power grab. The loss of wealth, real wealth, implies theft, as we learn from our young girl as they go through things. One of the ways, if we take our brains as being computers, to fix a computer with a bad virus is to turn back the clock and go back before the virus was put in the computer. You can do that with your brain too. You just go back in time to say, okay, what was it like a generation before? How is it different? Ah, now I see what they want. So we go through the list number, item number 1. It's the first thing they taught us to hate is God. There is no God. Science says so. But then we find out there's science they don't tell us about. Cheating. They're cheating. And I talked about the book, The God Code, that I read. Is just fantastic, where we see, you know, the science that has proved that when they find a simple substitution code in our DNA, there's a letter in there from God to tell us. He's got his patent mark all over every DNA that's ever been created. It says God eternal within the body. It's in every DNA. So it tells us there's a creator. We could probably still argue about who the creator is, but we know there was one. Then the big one, of course, they say that the odds of life being created by random chance, as they tell us, is, you know, this is the way we evolved. But scientists, mathematicians, and astronomers got together and say the chances of a simple form of life being formed by random chance are 1 × 10 to the power of 40,000, which is almost impossible. It is impossible. Religion, another big mouthful. So they turn everything ass over tea kettles to make us believe in Amun-Ra, the sun god. We go to church on Sunday, we get rid of Sabbath day. And then they teach us through another classic piece of programming. They say, well, something bad happens to you, well, that proves there's no God, because God wouldn't let bad things happen to you. But God told us we have free choice, even free choice to pick other gods. And he laughs, as this is recorded in Scripture, to say, well, if you pick the wrong one and you go to him for your salvation, I will let you have your pick. You can go to him and get this salvation. So in my reverse logic, I say, you know, if you call the corner store when you need an ambulance, does that prove there's no hospitals? Think about it. Then we get into all this pagan idolatry and worse, but you know, Jeremiah 10:2-4. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heaven are dismayed at them. For the customs of people are vain. Vain, you're wasting your time. For one cutteth the tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and gold, they fasten it with nails and with hammers that move it not. Sounds like a Christmas tree, eh? And what are we doing with that? We're celebrating Saturnalia, because pagans decorated their houses with clippings of evergreen shrubs. They also decorated living trees with bits of metal and replicas of their god, Bacchus, this happy-looking fellow right here, that if that don't look like the devil himself, I don't know. So what do you got to do? You got to turn back the clock, baby, because we're on the wrong page. Number 3, the family. We have to have a war on the family. You can't have this happy mummy, daddy, baby kind of stuff. The state has to look after the children. You have to be the pure, fine Aryan, where we just change everything around and change all the rules of letting parents have control over their children and have the state come into your house for everything. And if you don't embrace the state, well, then you have a mental illness that requires you to be reprogrammed or eliminated. And that just happens very, very slickly. The war on children. So they teach, you know, people that children are some kind of burden or nuisance or something, you know, evil. It's not like a natural, proper, decent thing. And they teach women that you should be on the factory floor or in the corporate boardroom doing what guys do. And, you know, nothing against women working or having careers or anything like that, but they're teaching us that your role as a mother is valueless, when that's not true. The role of the mother is of supreme value, and probably the most valuable role on the planet Earth is to create life and have that life nurtured to the ultimate degree. There can be no greater calling. But they teach us that's wrong, and it's better to get into corporate dogfights and die an old spinster alone with no children to bury you even. Or even worse, to kill your children in these abortion procedures. Say that you have to have rights. Yes, women have rights. You have the right to choose. And when you make a bad choice, it's like, instead of going to the stairs, I want to walk out the window to go to the street. Bad choice. When I hit the sidewalk, it's going to hurt if I live. But I made the choice, so if I make the choice, I have to accept the responsibility, because that goes hand in glove with making choices. If you make a bad choice, I don't see killing the baby having anything good to do about it. I think just evil will beget evil. They changed the whole role of gender issues, sexuality. The ultimate thought crime, of course, is now that we have to extol homosexuality, which is people's choice. If you want to do that, do that. That's your choice. But the big thing is we're all sinners anyway, so there's no sense for me to go and say, okay, well, you're a sinner and I'm not, because that's not true. God said we're all sinners. We have to look harder, and Christ said in his own words, get the thorn out of your own eye first. In fact, it's bigger than a thorn. It's like a lumber. You got a big stick in your eye. It's not a thorn. I just want to make sure you do have a free choice so that the environment isn't polluted by chemicals that change the hormonal balance in your body or have some other effect on you, or that you get a pre-programmed psychological warfare response to something. It's got to be your own free choice that you've decided to do something on your own. And even if you choose something that's different than me, it's your choice. But it has to be a fair choice. But what I'm really concerned about is the population agenda. We have this book written by Nobel Prize winner in economics, Jan Tinbergen of the Club of Rome. I found this at the library, Reshaping the International Order, Rio, a report to the Club of Rome. And that's something that should be very, very scary to a lot of people. A lot of people. You know, you read that, but not enough food, we're all going to die, we got to take drastic action. And part of it's reducing the population curve by hook or by crook, because once we just start with these rights, well, then we have to have the right for euthanasia, we have to have the right to get rid of the, you know, the less prominent members of our society, the sick, maybe the retarded, stuff like that, just like Hitler did. It becomes just an unbelievable slippery slope. We come up with soft-focused genocide items, like they banned Freon and DDT. So a lot of people, millions, died from lack of affordable refrigeration. So we say we're saving the earth by banning Freon, but really we're genociding lots of poor people. DDT, like that's one thing that really blew me. I was in school when they came up with this, you know, Silent Storm book or whatever, the DDT is this horrible thing. And then I find out later in my older years that the guy who invented DDT, Paul Herman Mueller, won the Nobel Prize in medicine. And I'm just going like, whoa, wait a minute, how can that be? Because the spray DDT killed the malarial mosquitoes and saved millions of lives every year. It was the greatest medical discovery in human history, according to the way things were when we turned back the clock. So then one of the other big things they want to do is they want us to hate our food. We have to hate our food, you know, because it's natural. We have to have genetically modified food, food that's perfect, food that's worked out in the laboratory, food that contains our prescriptions inside, or other things that can alter or change our bodies in ways that we do not want or understand. We come to a point where we copyright food, even though they didn't make the creation, God did, but they copyright parts of the creation so they can have control of it, and they make plants with suicide seeds so they can't germinate on their own, which means we could end up with a period of time where no food grows and we all starve to death. And then it made a lot of sense when they came up with this global seed vault in Svalbard Island, because even they know that. This Roundup Ready stuff just isn't working. It's an abysmal failure. And we just keep falling to Satan. So ultimately when we eat this crap, who knows what it's going to do to our bodies. It's just going to turn us inside out. And of course the other thing we have to hate is herbal medicines, because they heal our body. They come from God's garden. Corporations want to patent and profit. And if they don't patent and profit, there's no cure. The other thing they get us to hate is the Constitution. Constitutions are old, outmoded, no good. They don't really understand the new world and how it works. We need to have a council of elders that rule by decree. And the constitutions get in the way of that. That's big trouble. That's why the United States put the Second Amendment in their Constitution, because you needed the arms to protect something that was valuable. And the most valuable thing that you had to protect was the Constitution and the rights of we the people. So we were lucky to find these little images that go bang and with a bullet whizzing by to make light of that. Of course, the other thing they make us hate is firearms. We have to hate firearms because we have to have fear. We have to have fear, so we go begging to the people who want to enslave us to take away the guns to make it easier for them. So they create this panic, this fear, to make you hate everything that's for your own good or your own benefit. because ultimately you must be eliminated. So we're having local, national, and global gun control effects happening all over the planet Earth. And that picture was the twisted barrel on the United Nations big handgun in front of the United Nations building in New York City. It is a nefarious plot because the United States, through Operation Fast and Furious, armed Mexican drug gangs and gave them lots and lots of guns so they could cause a mass death shooting spree that would make people come begging for gun control. It's not a brilliant plan, it was an evil plan. And then people say the government couldn't be behind terrorism. Yes, they could. Attorney General Eric Holder actually opined brainwashing people to accept gun control and anything else they want. Another thing they make us hate is nations. Nations are the cause of war, they say. No, they're not. A nation is inert. It's like a corporation, sort of. It doesn't exist. It's the people that run it that are the cause of war. And the people that run it are the globalists. And if the globalists win, they're going to run the one global government just like they've been running national governments. They're the evil ones. They're the cause of war. And in that propaganda shot from Coca-Cola Company with all the flags, of course, they give prominence to the United Nations flag, the global government flag, to teach you that the nation states, your countries, have to be subservient to the one world order. And then if Coke is poison anyway because it's full of phosphoric acid, rots your teeth, dissolves your joints. So you're getting it from the ultimate evil elixir company. And then of course there's many books written on things like that, like Kenichi Oma's The End of the Nation State. A lot of political science behind this. I have a link to articles in Foreign Affairs so that they get you to believe this stuff. And if you do believe it, you fall for this trick, you deserve to be in the Darwin Awards. Those are people that die from total stupidity. Because it's just like the car is no more responsible for the accident, it's the driver, and as I like to coin, the nut behind the wheel. It's the nut behind the wheel driving the car that's responsible for the accident. And it's the same with the nuts running our countries. They're responsible for the wars, the injustice, and the problems. All based on this book, propaganda, and how they can twist and manipulate your mind to do anything. Because the last thing they want you to hate is you. You have to hate yourself so that you can give them power over yourself. And they even use that in the propaganda. Your country needs you. I want you. Yes, they want you. Don't give yourself up and don't hate yourself and don't let them have power over you, because if you do, you'll regret it forever. Ontario still trying to keep gun ledgers and register the guns so that they can find out where they are for when the time comes. Ontario sold its right to a corporation in Tennessee to issue hunting licenses. We're stupid here in Canada. We can't figure out how to do hunting licenses, but a company called Active Outdoors in Nashville is going to do the hunting licenses in the United States. And it says clearly when you call their number that you are greeted by a recording that says personal information may be stored outside of Canada and subject to the laws of the jurisdiction where it is stored. I think Nashville's in the United States, and I think the Department of Homeland Security is in the United States, and I think the Patriot Act's in the United States, and they're even too stupid to understand the National Defense Authorization Act is in the United States, and you're subject to those laws even though you're in Canada. There's brain dead. They're saying drop Zimmerman's murder charge. It's come out in the evidence, even this, a lot of it's suppressed still. There's swear affidavits that aren't true or full. That he had significant injuries to the fact where he was entitled to use deadly force to protect himself, even if he failed in the criteria of the stand your ground law by advancing the ground. The fact that he did get into a conflict, even if it was a conflict he started, doesn't give the other guy the right to beat him to death, and somewhere along the line Zimmerman was correct in pulling the trigger. The Pacific Ocean is dying. So this is the convergence zone where all the junk from the Fukushima disaster is going to assemble. The radiation water that they're using in the place is just being pumped into the Pacific, completely untreated. Fish are dying. It's just a toxic soup, and it's the biggest piece of water on the planet Earth, by the way. This is some of the stuff that gets into that little zone in the center. Amazing how all that stuff floats. God only knows what it's sitting on. But this is just some of the nature of the beast of all this refuse and garbage that's going everywhere. But the worst thing is that water is going all over the planet. Mysterious illnesses are striking flight attendants in Alaska. They're getting basically the same effects of what you would get from fallout exposure. They're getting lesions and sores on their body and their hair's falling out. And they say, well, no, 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 it's their uniforms. But okay, yeah, maybe it is their uniforms. The only trouble is the polar bears don't wear uniforms, and they're suffering from the same effects. How's that? New global armed conflict may start at any moment. China and the Philippines, as we've been saying, are squaring off over rights to an island called Huanyan. The Philippines claim it. The Chinese say we accept the old colonial government's definitions of what's property and what's not, and we say that because of agreements made after the Spanish-American War and other agreements that followed, that that island isn't Philippine territory, so it must be Chinese territory. And it's getting to the point of push come to shove because there's possibly oil and gas discoveries to be made under there, and that's one thing we're very good at, is fighting over everything. Tony Blair goes to a United States college, Colby College. He's heckled as a warmonger. He says in his speech that we have to try to understand other cultures. But then they go and blow up and bomb other cultures on a regular basis. Even though globalization is making things more difficult in the Western world, we must embrace it. Huh? Even though the burner on the stove is really hot, we have to keep our hand there. Are you stupid? You think we're stupid? Well, some of us are stupid. Some of us that don't even for a moment take a moment to look at the big picture with all the things that we're facing. So in a few minutes we could straighten it out. It wouldn't take much. It was a murder of a rich Russian tycoon again. He was supposed to be having an affair with what's called Princess Pushy. A beautiful woman in her age. Seems to be a very simple homicide to solve. So Mikhail Kravchenko was shot 10 times. 5 in the body, 5 in the head. In Russia. He was in his car. He was supposed to be a mysterious passenger who disappeared, possibly 2 gunmen. He had a £130 million a year furniture business. That ain't hay, I guess. There's notorious corrupt people all over Russia. But when we look at the princess's husband looking in the background with the evil eye, I think we can line up the suspects very, very quickly there and say that Prince Michael, who just happened to be in Russia the week before, flew to St. Petersburg to be awarded a degree by a Russian university for his services in British-Russian relations, accepted £320,000 in secret payments from Russian oligarch Boris Berezovsky, a leading foe of President Vladimir Putin. That's a good cover story, maybe. So, did hubby get rid of his wife's beau? Claimed the boy toy or something like that in the popular press? Seems to be the short answer. But then if this guy was a foe of Putin, I can't see we're going to get much cooperation there. Speaking of cooperation and Putin, you've got to see the video. It's in our video section, a letter from Poland. It's all about the Polish plane crash. One of our big fans in Germany sent me this. It was a film production in Holland. It is chilling, absolutely chilling, about what the Russians did to the Polish people. That should have been cause for war, but it wasn't, because basically we were stabbed in the back by our own people in NATO anyway. So all the beautiful people that didn't show up at the funeral for Kaczynski are obviously part and parcel of the plot. And they even left their bodies to rot in the blazing hot sun. Didn't even clean them up. It was so bad they were going to send a Polish archaeologist to gather evidence because all the flesh rotted off the bones. But he died in a car crash. And the guy who took the pictures, I can't recall if they said that in the documentary or not. Shouldn't watch them when it's too late at night, but it was just so good. But he died 2-3 days later in hospital. We did a great show on that. Dial M, Moscow for Murder. That's still archived on our website. An old show we did when this happened, hard and fresh. It don't get any better. And then just to show you the comparison of the different media. So BBC has an article, some guy, a British subject, is arrested in Thailand in possession of human fetuses in his luggage. They don't tell you who he is, they don't tell you any details about it. So you figure, well, there's got to be more to this story. Well, what do you know? You go to Agence France Presse and the guy's got a name. Cho Hak Kwon 28, Taiwanese So he had them packed in his luggage to smuggle them to Taiwan. He bought the fetuses several days ago from a Taiwanese man in Thailand for 200,000 baht, roughly 6,500 bucks. He planned to smuggle them into Taiwan to retrieve 6 times their value. They believe that these fetuses make their clients as lucky and rich. He faces a year in prison and a 2,000 baht fine. It's also used in black magic rituals. One of the most disgusting parts of it was they were roasted and covered in gold leaf for these black magic rituals. I wonder if they eat them with Tabasco sauce or not, but it just shows you how they only tell you not even half the story. You're lucky if you got 10% of the information in the BBC version, because I imagine some of these black magic rituals are even practiced in London, maybe even at the palace. Who knows? They're that kind of folk. Maybe Charles and Camilla here in Toronto are feasting on a little something as we speak. Who knows? All the droids are lined up to welcome them at Queen's Park. Then another sickening story that goes about it, Daily Mail, that's why I love that paper. China's gruesome human baby flesh pills. So they take these aborted fetuses, grind them up into powder, put them in a pill, and sell them. It's supposed to cure all your ailments. Like, if that isn't sick, I don't know what is. It's just absolutely, totally disgusting. But what can we say? There's a new drug that rivals thalidomide out on the market. It's an anti-epileptic drug called Epilum. 20,000 babies damaged from this. So if you're epileptic and you're having children, get the hell off that drug. You can bounce on the floor, the baby will still be okay. But don't take that drug. And I guess we're running close to the end of the line here, but I guess we got to do a quick little thing on something timely. As we had one of our classic terrorists die, L. McGrary. He's supposed to be the the living, breathing, horrible guy responsible for Pan Am 103's crash. And I'll tell you something, that's just a load of crap. It doesn't take too long to find out what's going on. But this has been a, basically a false flag conviction going back a long way. And there's always conspiracies. Always. The reason they let the guy out was basically for oil deals, to open up Libya's business accounts. But he really didn't do it, he was a patsy. And even though he, just some things make you look guilty, he goes back to Tripoli and he's greeted as a hero, but they don't tell you what the real reason why he was greeted back as a hero. It had nothing to do with the fact that he blew up the plane and they were welcoming him back because he's some kind of terrorist or warrior. Had absolutely nothing to do with that. He opened Libya up for business. Libya was under sanctions for pretty much close to a generation. And then people started to do business again. And a lot of inflow of cash came in. So he liberated Libya to economic prowess and sacrificed a good few years in prison by being the fall guy for Gaddafi and this terror plot. So there's a lot of dope. You can just, it's not conspiracy stuff, just stuff well recorded on Wikipedia that you can look up Pan Am 103 and go through the thing. But the most important thing to understand is who was on the plane. It's one of the big things you look for. One of the most important people on the plane was Matthew Gannon, the CIA's deputy station chief in Beirut. And he was traveling with an associate, Major Chuck McKee, an Army officer in the Defense Intelligence Agency. And then as you just start to just get into it just a little bit, there's a report from a police sergeant on the day of the crash reporting to government in Scotland that they're tampering with the evidence. The CIA came and went all over the crash site. They're alleged to have taken away a body that isn't counted in the totals, and a lot of stuff. They took contents of cases away and then put the cases back. One of the cases, carried by this Major Chuck McKee, is supposed to be a caseload of narcotics, a suitcase full of narcotics. They also had 2 diplomatic security officers on the plane to guard these guys. They died as well, of course. But this goes right back to the fact, even before this happened, there was a warning sent to Sweden, I believe, that this was going to happen 2 weeks before. The German police arrested members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. That was a terrorist group when I was even studying terrorist groups, saying that they had exactly the same kind of detonators and things to go at this. And they make a point of this in the documentary on the Letters for Poland. They took this plane, put it in a warehouse, rebuilt it, went through the evidence piece by piece by piece by piece till they found a little piece of evidence smaller than a fingernail to show the detonator. The Russians did nothing. They just let everything rot and rust in a field. But this guy, he takes us inside the whole concept of the intelligence agencies smuggling narcotics. This Major McKee is implicated with Oliver North and Arms for Contra. That's how they raise money, selling narcotics, taking it all over the place. And the connections go into Syria, Syria's government. It's just a nasty business. And there's also the effect of the Iranians maybe having participants in this to get justice for their aircraft that was shot down by the USS Vincennes. But this had absolutely nothing to do with this guy and the lone nut bar assassin, and everything to do with big business, big intelligence, big criminality, from end to end, sea to shining sea. And Matthew Gannon, his father-in-law, was a deputy director of operations with the CIA too, so he comes from a very high-end CIA family. That was the main guy behind what was going on in that, but they just keep all that stuff just covered up and covered up and covered up, and that's why you have to come somewhere else to get it uncovered, uncovered, uncovered. And if you don't come, you never find out. And if you never find out, well then one day it may be you that faces the denouement somewhere, not even beginning to understand how it works. And then it's too late to change. The big thing that's going to come for us, of course, is this financial collapse. It's coming along like a steamroller. Even the popular press are saying they may not see it coming. It's too late, which is something I've said months ago with that funnel diagram that's still posted on the blog. That once we pass that point, it's only once we pass that point that we can look back and say, now it's collapsed. That's the way the math works. So you won't see it until it's over. And then it's too late. And then you just have to survive. And how are you going to survive if you don't change the channel? That's what boggles my mind. It's good to hear from new listeners, to know the message is getting out from places all over the planet Earth. Do something useful. Help us join this fight. Don't wait for a member of parliament from Iceland to come here and fight with us. Fight with us. There's a donate button on the website. That channel has an address. I have a name. Stuff something in there, send it to me, and we can carry on the fight. And that way we'll never have to fight, because the battle is changing the channel. We don't have to even take to the streets or use the Second Amendment. Everything's there. You need a gutsy judge. You need people to put court cases before the courts. You need a channel to change to. A truth, a justice, an American way, a Canadian way, anything we can get our hands on to win this fight. I'll come in here and knock it out and sock it out to the best of my abilities. But we can make it a whole lot easier if we realize this is a partnership, a team between myself and you. Or even just send in a postcard and just say, thanks for coming out. You don't have to put your name on it. Just say, I'm over here and wherever you are. And we're listening. We're getting the message. We're doing something. Because this is the only way we're going to survive. Because the step after financial collapse is even worse. It's human history. When we get to that stage, we usually fight it out. And with the superpowers having the weapons they do today, we don't ever want to get to that stage. We can change the banking system. We can stop getting into the debt finance situation for governments. We do that, we live, we survive, nothing goes wrong. It's an easy fight. Change the channel. We thank you for coming to this channel. We thank you for coming to that channel. This is Conspiracy Cafe. This is The Point of the Sword. This is Downtown Toronto. We'll be back Thursday night after the next Thursday. We appreciate you. Hope you appreciate us. Good night.
asks about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain, and no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Ten trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money in the dark.